The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. Alien civilizations, some older than time itself, held vast dominions across the stars. The alien Empress, who ruled over an empire that stretched from one end of the galaxy to the other, had seen countless species rise and fall. Humans, in her eyes, were no more than a footnote in the history of the universe. They had been confined to their small blue planet, Earth, for as long as anyone could remember. Their technology, primitive and backward, was hardly worth noticing. For decades, the Empress had watched Earth from afar. She had seen humans struggle, fight wars among themselves, and barely survive the dangers of their own world. It was a miracle they had even made it into space, but the Empress had never worried. Humans were weak, and their attempts to expand beyond their planet were laughable at best. Then, everything changed. A strange, encrypted signal was detected. It came from deep space, far beyond the territories the Empress controlled. Her fleet's top scientists scrambled to decode it, but nothing could prepare them for what they discovered. It wasn't just any signal. It was a message from humanity. It had been years since humans had attempted to reach out to the stars. Their silence had been taken as an end to their ambition. But now, they had returned. The message was simple: we are coming. At first, the Empress dismissed it. After all, Earth was still far from any of her colonies, and the humans hadn't even managed to build ships capable of deep space travel. She was certain it was a mistake, a foolish attempt to attract attention. She ordered her fleet to ignore the message. It was nothing but a disturbance. But then, the first human ship appeared on the edge of her empire's reach. It was massive, far larger than anything humanity had built before. A supercarrier, the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. It was a ship so vast that it dwarfed anything the Empress's empire had ever constructed. It was as if a small moon had suddenly appeared in the sky. The alien fleets watched in silence as the ship made its way toward their borders. The Empress was intrigued. Could this be some sort of mistake? She dispatched a fleet of her own ships to intercept the human vessel, expecting to quickly destroy it, just as she had done with so many other insignificant threats. But when the human ship didn't flinch or make any attempt to retreat, the Empress's curiosity grew. She ordered her fleet to hold their position and observe. As the human ship got closer, it became apparent that this was no ordinary vessel. Its design was unlike anything the Empress had ever seen. Sleek and powerful, it seemed almost alive, as though it had been forged for war. But there was something else, something in the way the ship moved. Calm and calculated, as if it was preparing for something much greater. Then, as if answering the Empress's silent question, a second ship emerged from the shadows of space, and then a third, and a fourth. It didn't stop. One by one, supercarriers began to emerge from the dark void, each one more massive and more impressive than the last. The fleet grew, faster than the Empress's intelligence officers could keep track of. The ships came from all directions, filling the space like an unstoppable wave. 200 supercarriers. The Empress watched in stunned silence. How could this be possible? Her fleet of scouts had reported nothing. No signs of these ships being built, no indication that humanity had any such capability. She had been wrong, so terribly wrong. What she was seeing was not just a single ship, but an entire fleet, one that had been built in secret, one that was now poised to strike. Humanity was not weak. They had been preparing for this moment, and the galaxy had failed to notice. The first thought that crossed the Empress's mind was that she needed to act, and fast. Her empire had fought and defeated countless species, but this was different. She had underestimated the humans, and now she was facing the consequences. With a wave of her hand, she ordered her fleets to assemble. She would show them that no matter how many ships they had, they were still just humans, and they were still no match for the might of the Empress's empire. But deep down, a sinking feeling began to grow. Was she truly ready for this? The human fleet, meanwhile, made its way toward the center of the galaxy, crossing the vast distances of space, as if they had no fear at all. The supercarriers moved together in perfect formation, their weapons bristling with deadly intent. Every single ship was a fortress, every one of them capable of devastating destruction. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to fight. The message was clear. The Empress could no longer afford to ignore humanity. They had crossed the line, and they had come to challenge her rule. As the human fleet continued its approach, the first signs of engagement were seen. The Empress's ships began to maneuver into position, ready to intercept the invaders. The battle lines were being drawn, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Humanity was no longer the prey. They had become the predators. And the Empress knew that her empire, as vast and powerful as it was, might not be enough to stop them. This introduction should provide an engaging and suspenseful opening, with the reveal of humanity's supercarriers and the shock of the alien Empress. The setup is perfect for the following parts, where the battle intensifies and the tension between the two powers builds. Let me know if you need further adjustments. The tension in the galaxy had reached its boiling point. The 200 human supercarriers, each a marvel of engineering and military might, moved forward without hesitation. They moved as a singular force, a symbol of humanity's newfound power. Behind them, smaller ships buzzed like a swarm of hornets, ready to strike at anything that dared to challenge them. The alien Empress had ordered her fleet into battle formation, but the uncertainty that gnawed at her was palpable. This was not a small skirmish. This was a full-scale war. Her mind raced. How could this be happening? Her empire had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and now a primitive species from a backwater planet was challenging her dominance. As the two forces neared one another, the first shots rang out. The humans, precise and coordinated, fired their weapons in a synchronized barrage. The blast of energy from their supercarriers lit up the dark expanse of space, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Alien ships, once thought invincible, were torn apart in the blink of an eye. The sheer power of the human weapons was unlike anything the Empress's fleet had ever encountered. Her fleet retaliated, but the attacks were ineffective. The human ships had shields that seemed impenetrable. Every shot the aliens fired either ricocheted off or was absorbed by the human ship's advanced technology. The Empress's fleet began to falter. The battle that had seemed so certain just hours ago was now slipping out of her grasp. She was not prepared for this. Human tactics were different from what the Empress had seen. They weren't using brute force. They were using precision and intelligence. The human supercarriers, each one commanding an armada of smaller ships, were weaving through the battlefield like skilled predators. They knew their enemies' weaknesses, and they exploited them with terrifying accuracy. The Empress watched as her ships were decimated, one by one. In the midst of the chaos, one of the human ships, a supercarrier called Valor, led the charge. It was one of the most formidable vessels in the human fleet, and it was helmed by one of the greatest tacticians humanity had ever produced, Admiral Marcus Gray. The Empress's spies had reported that the Admiral had led countless successful campaigns, but she had never expected to face him in battle. He was a legend, humanity's war genius, and now he was leading the charge against her empire. The Valor released a salvo of missiles, each one cutting through space at unimaginable speeds. The Empress's flagship, the Dread Sovereign, tried to maneuver out of the way, but the missiles found their mark. Explosions erupted across the Dread Sovereign's hull, rocking the ship and sending shockwaves through its command deck. The Empress herself was shaken in her throne room. Her closest advisors scrambled to maintain control of the situation, but it was clear this battle was not going in their favor. The human ships pressed forward with relentless determination. They didn't hesitate, didn't falter. They were everywhere. The sheer number of human ships was overwhelming. For every one of her ships destroyed, 2 more humans appeared in its place. The Empress began to realize just how much she had underestimated these creatures. Her mind flashed to the message they had sent. "We are coming." It wasn't a declaration of intent. It was a statement of fact. And now the Empress had no choice but to face the consequences. Amidst the chaos, the humans continued to advance, systematically taking down one ship after another. The Dread Sovereign's weapon systems were being destroyed, one by one. The Empress's once unbeatable empire was crumbling before her eyes. Panic spread through the alien ranks. Some of her commanders began to question their orders, but it was too late to turn back. The battle was already lost. Meanwhile, on the human supercarriers, the crews worked with calm precision. Admiral Gray stood on the bridge of the Valor, his eyes locked onto the view screen as the battle unfolded before him. He had been expecting this, but that didn't make it any easier. He knew that this wasn't just a military operation. It was a statement to the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they would no longer be ignored. He turned to his officers, giving them a single nod. "Prepare for Phase 2, he said, his voice steady. The plan was simple but effective. Break the enemy's morale and deliver a decisive blow to their leadership. If the Empress could be struck down, her empire would fall, and humanity's dominance would be cemented. It was a risky move, but it was the only option left. The next wave of attacks began. A new fleet of human ships, smaller but faster, darted in and out of the enemy's defenses. Their weapons fired in perfect harmony, picking off alien ships with terrifying accuracy. The Empress's fleet, once proud and mighty, was now disorganized and disjointed. The alien commanders could barely keep up with the human onslaught. The situation was spiraling out of control. The Empress clenched her fists in frustration. She had underestimated humanity, and now they were on the verge of victory. It was clear now. This was no ordinary fight. It wasn't just about ships or weapons. It was about something far more dangerous: the human spirit. The damage to the Dread Sovereign was severe, but the Empress refused to admit defeat. Her empire had weathered countless battles, and she was not about to let a group of primitive humans disrupt everything she had built. She gathered her remaining commanders in the war room, her fury palpable in the air. "We will not surrender," she declared, her voice cold and commanding. "We will not let these humans think they can defeat us. We have faced worse threats, and we have crushed them. This will be no different." The alien generals exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to contradict the Empress. They were on the verge of losing everything, and there was little hope left. But the Empress refused to let her fear show. She would fight to the last. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its assault. The Valor led the charge, its crew working tirelessly to tear down the alien defenses. Admiral Marcus Gray knew that they had to press on. The first victory was in their grasp, but it wouldn't be enough. They had to break the heart of the alien empire, its leadership. Admiral Gray sat in the command center of his ship, his eyes focused on the holographic display of the battlefield. He knew the Empress would retaliate soon. Her pride was her downfall, but that didn't make her any less dangerous. He studied the alien fleet's movements, looking for any opening, any weak spot that could be exploited. The alien ships, though damaged, were regrouping and forming a tighter defensive line. It was clear that the Empress was preparing for a counterattack. Her pride and stubbornness would not let her bow to defeat. The humans would have to push harder, strike faster. "All hands, prepare for Phase 3, Gray said, his voice steady but intense. The time had come to finish what they started. He knew the next step would determine the outcome of the battle. The human ships broke into smaller groups, each targeting a specific part of the alien defense. The Valor led the charge, its weapons blazing with deadly precision. The alien ships, though advanced, couldn't withstand the sheer force of the human onslaught. But the Empress was not idle. She had regrouped her fleet and launched a devastating counterattack. Waves of alien ships surged toward the human fleet, their weapons firing in unison. The space around them lit up with explosions as the two forces collided once more. The Empress, watching from the command center of the Dread Sovereign, felt a surge of hope. She could feel the tide turning. The humans were being pushed back, but as the battle raged on, she began to notice something strange. The humans weren't retreating. They were adapting, evolving their strategy with every move, every counter. It was as if they knew her every tactic, every move before she even made it. How are they doing this? She muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. She had studied them, underestimated them. And now it was too late. The humans were not just warriors. They were predators, and they had learned from every mistake. Admiral Gray, standing firm in the midst of the chaos, issued new orders. "We focus on their flagship, the Dread Sovereign," he said. "We have to take it down. If the Empress falls, the rest of the fleet will collapse." His officers nodded, and the human ships reorganized into a new formation. They focused all their efforts on the Dread Sovereign, the heart of the alien resistance. They were closing in, and the moment of truth was drawing near. The alien commanders, realizing that the humans were targeting their flagship, scrambled to defend it. But it was too late. The Dread Sovereign was no longer the fortress it once was. It was wounded, vulnerable, and now the humans had found the perfect opportunity. "All units, fire on the Dread Sovereign," Gray commanded. "This ends now." The human ships unleashed a concentrated volley of firepower that struck the alien flagship with unimaginable force. The Dread Sovereign shook violently as its shields buckled under the pressure. The Empress, her eyes wide with horror, watched as her flagship began to break apart. It was happening. The empire she had worked so hard to build was on the verge of collapse. As the Dread Sovereign was crippled, the alien fleet began to scatter. The human ships pressed forward, relentless in their pursuit of victory. The tide had turned completely in humanity's favor. The Empress, now filled with rage and disbelief, clenched her fists in fury. Her empire was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Prepare the escape pods," she ordered coldly. "We will not go down with this ship." But as the Empress turned to leave her command center, a voice cut through the chaos. A communication from her fleet. The humans had not only crippled the flagship, but had also begun targeting the central command of the alien empire itself, the heart of their military and political power. "Prepare for Phase 4, Gray said, his voice calm but resolute. "It's over. They've lost." The alien empire was collapsing, and humanity's victory was at hand. The Dread Sovereign was on its last legs. Its once mighty hull, a symbol of the alien empire's power, now floated damaged and burning in the void. Sparks flew from its gutted engines, and the wreckage of fallen ships littered the battlefield. Humanity's supercarriers, led by the relentless Valor, had dealt the final blow, pushing through alien defenses with surgical precision. Admiral Marcus Gray stood at the heart of the Valor's command center, his face stoic but proud. His eyes were locked on the holoscreen in front of him, watching as the Dread Sovereign teetered on the brink of destruction. He knew this was the moment that would go down in history. They had struck at the very heart of the alien empire and shattered it. "All ships, continue fire on the flagship," Gray barked, his voice echoing through the control room. "We take them down now. No mercy." The battle was nearly won, but there was still one final push needed. The human fleet had fought fiercely to get to this point, and now they couldn't stop. The alien Empress might be backing away, but she still held a sliver of power, and that was dangerous. They needed to remove that final thread of resistance. Inside the Dread Sovereign, the Empress paced in her command center. Her silver skin gleamed in the cold light of the war room. Her long black hair swayed with each sharp turn, her eyes burning with the remnants of defiance. She had seen her empire crumble before her very eyes, but she would not let herself be humiliated. Not yet. "Activate the escape pods," she ordered, "and send out all remaining fighters. We will fight to the last." Despite the failing state of the flagship, she refused to accept defeat. Her pride and arrogance had carried her far in life, and she would not relinquish them now. Even as the Dread Sovereign shuddered under relentless fire, the Empress scrambled for an escape plan. But as she ordered her final strike against the human fleet, something unexpected happened. The dread sovereign shuddered again, and the lights flickered. A deep, bone-rattling rumble filled the air as the alien flagship began to crack under the pressure. The shield systems were failing, and the ship's core was destabilizing. Her final hope, the weapon that could wipe out the remaining human ships, was not going to fire. Impossible. The Empress's voice faltered as panic crept into her thoughts. Her hand shook as she tapped the control panel in front of her. Override the systems. Get it back online. The crew scrambled in every direction, but it was too late. The dread sovereign was a hollow shell, its systems fried beyond repair. The ship's internal alarms screamed through the halls, signaling that the end was near. In the distance, the Valor and the other human supercarriers continued their relentless barrage. The energy cannons fired one final shot, an enormous beam of focused energy that pierced the dread sovereign's weakened hull, cutting through the flagship's core like a knife through butter. It was the end. The ship began to break apart, its massive structure splintering under the strain of the relentless assault. The Empress's command center, once a symbol of her unyielding authority, was now collapsing into the void. Her heart raced as the devastation unfolded. The enemy had won. She looked around her, seeing her remaining commanders scrambling to escape. The last of her forces had no chance. They were scattered, their fleet in disarray. There was no leadership left. There was no hope of victory. The Empress felt the weight of failure bearing down on her, and for the first time in years, she realized the truth. She had underestimated the humans. The dread sovereign, the mightiest ship in the galaxy, had fallen. Her empire, once so powerful, was crumbling in a single blow. The Empress turned to leave, but just as she did, she saw a flash on the screen, a message from her surviving fleet commanders. They were preparing to abandon ship. "We have no choice," one of the commanders said over the communication system. "We must retreat. The humans are too strong." "No," the Empress said through gritted teeth. "I will not flee." But as she stood in the ruined command center, the truth was undeniable. The humans had won. It was only a matter of time before they destroyed what remained of her empire. She had lost. The dread sovereign was no more. The flagship of the Empress's fleet had been destroyed, and with it, the heart of the alien empire. The humans had done it. They had broken through and struck at the very core of their enemies. Admiral Gray stood once more in the command center of the Valor, watching the remnants of the alien fleet scatter across the stars. His heart pounded in his chest, but there was no time for celebration. The war was not over yet. But one thing was clear. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. They had conquered the impossible. As the alien fleet fled into the void, the humans' victory seemed certain. But the Empress's escape would not be the end. Her desire for revenge would fuel her actions in the coming days. The universe had only just begun to realize the price of underestimating humanity. Admiral Gray turned to his officers. "We've won today," he said quietly. "But the war isn't over. Stay vigilant. We'll see this through to the end." The future was uncertain, but one thing was certain. The human fleet would not rest until every alien threat had been eradicated, and the galaxy would remember the day when humanity took its place as the true predators of the stars. The vast, glittering expanse of the galaxy stretched before the dread sovereign's broken hull. With the flagship now in ruins, the final remnants of the alien fleet scattered like insects fleeing from a predator. For a brief, shining moment, humanity had won. But beneath that victory, a storm was brewing. The Empress had escaped, but the war, as far as anyone could tell, was far from over. On the Valor, the crew watched in silence as the alien ships made their hasty retreat. Victory was in their grasp, but Admiral Marcus Gray knew this was not the end. His gaze was fixed on the damaged but still functioning holomap in front of him. It displayed the movements of the remaining alien forces as they regrouped, shifting into a new formation far from the human fleet's reach. "The Empress survived," said Commander Eva Rice, her voice low. "We've won the battle, but she's not done yet." Gray nodded grimly. I know. We need to find her before she can rally her forces again. The alien Empress was not one to accept defeat easily. Her flight from the Dread Sovereign was not a sign of surrender. It was merely a pause, a chance for her to regroup, to rebuild her army, and to plan her next move. Her empire was in shambles, but she was far from powerless. As the human fleet regrouped and tended to their battle-damaged vessels, the Valor's bridge hummed with activity. There was no rest for the victorious. Officers worked tirelessly to repair the ship, while the strategic teams began assessing the next steps. Every member of the crew understood the magnitude of what had just occurred. They had taken down the alien empire's most powerful weapon, but in doing so, they had just awoken the anger of the galaxy's most dangerous leader. The Empress's escape was the calm before the storm. She would rebuild, and she would come back with a vengeance. Meanwhile, in the depths of the alien empire, far beyond the reach of the human fleet, the Empress was not idle. As she escaped in one of her most advanced ships, she watched the stars burn in the distance, the remains of her fleet scattered behind her. She had barely escaped, and it would be some time before she could assemble the strength to strike again, but she was already formulating a plan. We may have lost the battle, but not the war, the Empress murmured to herself as her ship flew into the deep, dark reaches of space. Her voice was cold, almost serene. Humanity has made a grave mistake. They think they have won, but they do not understand the true power of my empire. The alien Empress was no fool. Despite the destruction of the Dread Sovereign, she knew the humans would not stop hunting her. It was only a matter of time before they came looking for her again. However, unlike before, she would not be the one hiding in the shadows. This time, she would be ready. Back on the Valor, Admiral Gray sat silently in his command chair, deep in thought. Victory was fleeting, and the war was far from over. He had hoped for an easier conclusion, but as he looked out at the stars, he knew the true fight was just beginning. The Empress won't wait long before she strikes back, he said softly to his crew. We need to be prepared for anything. I want all ships to be combat ready. No more surprises. The bridge buzzed with activity as his orders were relayed. They had just witnessed the fall of an empire, yet the galaxy was still teetering on the brink of chaos. The Empress's escape was a clear warning. Humanity's greatest challenge had not yet passed. Far from the humans' reach, the Empress's fleet began to reassemble in the shadows of a distant moon, hidden from the prying eyes of the human fleet. Alien ships, once considered superior, had been battered, but they were not defeated. Her loyal generals were already working to rebuild their forces. The Empress's escape from the Dread Sovereign was a setback, but not a death sentence. Aboard her new flagship, the Obsidian Fury, the Empress paced restlessly, her mind burning with the desire for revenge. She could feel the weight of her empire's loss on her shoulders, but her resolve only grew stronger. She would strike again, and this time, she would not be so easily overpowered. Her most trusted general stood by her side, waiting for her orders. We'll rebuild, Empress. We'll have the strength we need. The Empress stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she gazed out into the infinite darkness of space. The humans think they've won, she said, her voice dripping with venom. They think they've defeated me, but they have only awoken a sleeping giant. The general nodded. They won't know what hit them, Empress. The Empress's lips curled into a cold, dangerous smile. Let them come. I will show them why they should never have underestimated us. Her voice was sharp, filled with a quiet fury. The war was far from over, and humanity's actions had ensured that they would face the full wrath of her empire. Soon, the galaxy would once again tremble before her might. Back on Earth, the human fleet celebrated their hard-fought victory. But Admiral Gray was not celebrating. He was preparing for the war to continue, for the next battle to begin. Because deep down, he knew that the destruction of the Dread Sovereign was only the beginning. Humanity had made their mark on the galaxy, but so had the Empress. The hunt was far from over, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The quiet lull after the battle didn't last long. Despite the victory, the galaxy felt like a powder keg, with the smallest spark threatening to set off a cataclysmic war. The humans had achieved the unimaginable by toppling the dread sovereign, but the Empress's escape ensured that the fire wasn't out. If anything, it had just been rekindled. Back on Earth, Admiral Marcus Gray stood on the command deck of the Valor, staring at the holographic map before him. The map displayed a new course of action. Alien ships regrouping in far-flung corners of the galaxy, all converging toward a singular goal: vengeance. "We've barely scratched the surface," Gray muttered to himself, his fingers tapping on the map's controls. He had hoped that destroying the dread sovereign would break the back of the Empress's forces, but the latest intelligence reports were clear. The Empress had a far-reaching influence, and her empire was far from crumbling. Commander Eva Rice approached, her expression somber. "Admiral, the fleet is ready, but we're facing more than just retaliation. The Empress is known for her strategic brilliance. She won't strike carelessly." Gray nodded. "I know. We've got one shot. If we don't act fast, her retaliation will hit us hard." The human fleet had taken heavy casualties in the battle, but nothing compared to the loss the alien forces had suffered. The problem wasn't just numbers. It was the Empress's unwavering resolve and cunning. She would rebuild her strength, and the next strike would be devastating. "We've got to find where she's hiding," Gray said. "Her fleet can't be scattered forever. She'll make her move again soon. We have to anticipate it." The room fell silent as the crew processed the gravity of the situation. Everyone in the room knew that there was no time to waste. The Empress had tasted defeat, but she wasn't the kind to bow to it. Instead, she would come back stronger, angrier, and more prepared than ever. Meanwhile, on the Obsidian Fury, the Empress was already making plans. The galaxy had underestimated her once, but it would never happen again. She had escaped, but she wasn't running. She was preparing for the next phase of the war, a phase where humanity would feel the full wrath of her empire. The Obsidian Fury, a vessel of incomparable power, hovered over a distant planet in a remote star system, where the remnants of her fleet gathered. The ruins of destroyed ships drifted around the planet, but this was no sign of weakness. It was a message. The Empress had lost the battle, but she had not lost the war. On the bridge of the Obsidian Fury, the Empress surveyed the damaged ships floating in space. "Gather the survivors," she commanded, her voice cold and commanding. "We rebuild. We strike again." The fleet's remaining officers quickly went to work. Alien forces from across the galaxy had begun rallying around the Empress, their loyalty unwavering. The alien generals knew that to defeat the humans, they would need something more than just brute force. They would need strategy, cunning, and a weapon so powerful it would crush humanity's hope of victory. "We must return to the drawing board," the Empress said. "The humans have seen the strength of our hand, but they haven't yet seen the full extent of our power. It's time to unleash the true fury of the Empire." Admiral Gray stood at the head of the human fleet once again. He had come to understand that the war wasn't just about winning battles. It was about controlling the next move. The galaxy was not static, and the forces of the Empress were as relentless as a storm, only waiting to strike again. "Prepare for the worst," he said to his command team. "The Empress will not let this go. She'll be back with everything she has. We need to strike first, before she's able to rebuild fully." As the humans began their preparations, a quiet tension filled the air. They knew that their victory was temporary. The Empress was already plotting her revenge. And when she struck, it would be swift. And it would be brutal. Back on the Obsidian Fury, the Empress finally felt the weight of her plans coming to fruition. Her fleet would soon be at full strength, and she would have weapons that could rival anything humanity had ever seen. She stood in the heart of her war room, surrounded by her generals. "We will make the humans regret underestimating us. They've tasted victory, But that taste will soon turn bitter. One of her generals, a tall and imposing figure, stood beside her. "When do we strike, Empress?" "Soon," she said with a dangerous smile. "Very soon." The galaxy had never seen a war like this, and it was only just beginning. Back on Earth, the feeling of impending doom hung over humanity like a dark cloud. The Empress had escaped, and she was rebuilding, preparing to unleash a new phase of destruction upon the human race. Humanity's victory was temporary, but their resolve was not. "We cannot afford to wait," Admiral Gray said, turning to his crew. "We've seen what she's capable of. The next attack will be worse, and if we don't act quickly, we won't have a chance." The Valor's engines roared to life, and the human fleet set course for the stars, ready to face whatever the Empress had prepared. The galaxy was still in flames, and the fight was far from over. The calm before the storm had passed. Now, the true war was about to begin. The universe was a quiet, tension-filled void as both sides prepared for the coming storm. The short-lived peace that followed the initial clash was now just a distant memory. It was clear now. The galaxy would not remain still for long. No, this war was destined to grow even darker as the final reckoning between humanity and the alien empires loomed on the horizon. Humanity's fleet, after receiving the final orders from Admiral Marcus Gray, braced for the fight of their lives. The stakes were higher than ever before, and every man and woman aboard the ships understood the immense gravity of their mission. Their survival depended on speed, stealth, and precise action. Time was running out. Gray, now a seasoned leader in this intergalactic struggle, paced back and forth across the command deck of the Valor. His eyes locked onto the holographic map, which glowed faintly, outlining the various known locations of the Empress's fleet. But there was something more, something in the data that caught his attention. "Commander Reyes," Gray called sharply. "What's the status on that last encrypted transmission we intercepted?" Reyes, the trusted second-in-command, studied the data carefully. "It's from a scout ship we sent beyond the neutral zones. It indicates that the Empress has not only rebuilt her fleet, but she's also gained access to a new form of weaponry. It's unlike anything we've seen before." A chill ran down Gray's spine. If the Empress had developed a new weapon, it could be catastrophic. The stakes had just risen again. "This changes everything," Gray muttered, his mind racing with the implications. If the Empress truly possessed something so dangerous, humanity would be facing a weapon of unimaginable power. "We can't afford to play it safe anymore. We strike first. We can't let her complete her preparations." Commander Reyes nodded, her face a mask of determination. "A calculated risk, sir, but it's the only choice we have." On the Obsidian Fury, the Empress watched the stars outside her window, the cold, indifferent lights twinkling in the vastness of space. Her long, sharp fingers hovered over a holographic display, showing the position of her fleet. She had never been more focused, more certain of the victory that would soon be hers. A new weapon, a new plan. The technology she had uncovered during her escape from the Dread Sovereign was far more advanced than she had anticipated. With it, she could wipe out entire fleets in seconds. This was the final phase of her preparation, her revenge on the humans. "Your Highness, the fleet is ready," one of her generals said as he bowed respectfully before her. "We are prepared for the final confrontation. The humans will not know what hit them." The Empress turned, her cold gaze locking onto her general. Her voice was like ice. "Let them think they have the advantage. Let them think we are on the run. We'll give them one final strike, one that will burn away any hope they have left." Gray and Rice sat in the war room aboard the Valor, their faces drawn with the weight of their decision. The plan was simple but incredibly dangerous. Infiltrate the enemy's stronghold, strike at the heart of the Empress's new weapon, and take down her fleet before they could launch it. But as the final plans came together, the cold reality set in. If they failed, if even one part of their mission fell apart, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Everyone's ready," Rice said, her voice steady but tinged with the strain of the moment. "This will be the hardest fight we've faced yet." Gray nodded. He had no illusions about what lay ahead. But there was no other choice. He had to believe they could win. Across the galaxy, an army of ships, hundreds of them, drifted in formation around the Empress's flagship. She had crafted a perfect web of strategy, each vessel in place, each calculation accounted for. The time to strike had come. In the final moments before both fleets met in the empty void of space, the Empress's voice echoed through the comms. "Prepare to witness the end of humanity. This is where your story ends." She didn't wait for a response. The fleets converged in the darkness, a deadly dance of ships prepared to unleash their fury on one another. The battle began with a violent eruption of energy, blasts of plasma and laser fire tearing through the vacuum. The human ships, well coordinated, launched their first wave of attack. They had to act fast, or everything they'd fought for would be lost. "All units, engage." Gray's voice cut through the chaos, his orders steady even as explosions rocked the Valor. The humans had superior tactics, and their experience was evident. But the Empress's forces weren't ordinary. Her new weapon was more than just destructive firepower. It was a force that could cripple entire fleets in an instant. The power it held was nearly incomprehensible. "We can't let her use it," Gray said through gritted teeth. "Take out the flagship, or this battle is lost." But the Empress was far too clever for that. She had expected this move. Her ships were already positioned in such a way that the human fleet was trapped. And just as Gray's heart sank, the unthinkable happened. The Empress's new weapon powered up, bright, brilliant, and devastating. Humanity's fleet was in its path, and in mere moments, the first ships were completely annihilated. Gray's mind raced as the Valor barely dodged a blast. "We have to go in now. Move in for the final strike. Now."